Good morning, grade 11. Welcome back to class. I am so happy that you are joining me today. And as you can see from the title on screen, we are going to be talking about point of view in short story writing. So get your books and your pencils and your pens out. We are about to have another exciting lesson. Now, before we jump into the meat of the matter, let's do a quick recap of what we discussed last week. So, in our last class, we talked about the different elements of the short story. We would have gone through them. We would have explored them using a short story, of course. And we would have talked about how they each benefit or contribute to an interesting story. We also talked about the benefits of writing from personal experiences. And I would have stressed that, you know, some of the best stories that a lot of great authors would have produced actually stemmed from their personal experiences. And so I continue to encourage you guys to write from your personal experiences. Yes, you can make some adjustments here and there, but truly consider that as well. And we also talked about the importance of reading. Yes, Jeremy, reading. I know that some of you shy away from reading, but this is the exercise that will really help to spark imagination and inspiration for your own writing. And so I don't want you to shy away from it. I want you to embrace the benefits of reading widely so that when it is time for you to write, you will feel comfortable. And also it's good to build your vocabulary, which is also very important. All right, so now that we've done our recap, let's get into the lesson. So I'm going to be sharing 2 images with you today that will just help to get your mental juices running as we consider the topic that we're going to be talking about today. So on my screen, I have a photo. And within this photo, there are 2 different images, and I want you to tell me the first image that you saw when I changed the slide. All right, so Amy says the first image that she saw was the face of a woman. Did you see that, John? John says all he saw were the birds flying towards the nest. So very good. 2 different images here being portrayed on the screen in the same photo. What about this one? The first thing I saw when I looked at this photo was the image carved out in the landscape of a man's face. Yeah, Susie says she saw, that's the first thing she saw as well. And then I saw the woman sitting on the rock and the man playing the flute. So this is just my way of introducing the topic of point of view to you students, and it will help you to, you know, just wrap your head around what we're going to be discussing today. So for our objectives, at the end of the lesson, you should be able to list 3 points of view and their variations, identify various points of view in a short story, and you should be able to rewrite an excerpt from a story in a different point of view from the one provided. All right, sounds good, sounds achievable. I think we can do this. All right, so what is point of view? Point of view focuses on the type of narrator used to tell the story. Now, every story has a narrator. Otherwise, there would be no story. And this voice impacts the way we understand, criticize, or feel about the storyline and its characters. So whether that narrator is first person, second person, or third person, we will, at the end of the day, leave that story with a sort of view of that character or the events in the story. So the narrator is very important, whether it is a character within the story, outside of the story, as we will look more into, it all contributes to how we understand that story. So let's take a look at our first example. And can I have a volunteer to read, please? Okay, Anne, go ahead. It was dark inside the wolf. I could hear the beast's beating heart, a frantic and quite irregular rhythm. The bile in his stomach was unbearable. Crunched up against Granny in this wet, soft crypt, or pending doom echoed in her moans. A twist here, a turn there, this wolf had no pity. With such a small space, I could never kick us free. If only this side of the woods weren't so lonely. Silently, I prayed for just a brave, wandering soul to free us, like the heroes in my fairy tale book. But wait, a knocking. Who could it be? What could it be? All right, well done, Susie. Excellent reading, and I specifically liked your intonations. Very good storytelling. So students, my first question is, can you identify this story that I used for our first extract? Yes, Michael, I saw you blowing up the chat. It is indeed Little Red Riding Hood as told by Little Red Riding Hood. Very good. Now my second question is, what is the predominant pronoun that you see coming out of this excerpt? Very good. Tom says he sees a lot of eyes. And that's a very good observation. And that is what we will use to take us into the first characteristic of the first person narrator. This narrator uses I, we, and us pronouns. So when we are identifying the use of the different points of view in a short story, we want to pay attention to the pronouns that are being used. So in this story, we have I could hear, I could never, I prayed. And this allows us to understand that the story is being told from the first person narrator. Now, another very important thing to note is that the first person narrator is actually a character within the story. And we know that Little Red Riding Hood was actually the main character in the story. Now, oftentimes we'll find that the story is not being told from the main character, but rather from a minor character or a character in the background of the story per se. Now, the third thing about the first person narrator that we want to take note of is that this character can be seen as unreliable or reliable. So, I don't know if any of you have ever read a story and the words that the narrator is using and his or her tone, perhaps, there's just something off, I guess you could say. Have any of you ever had that experience? Yes, Michael, I have as well. So sometimes in reading from a first person, listening to a story from the first person narrator, you can ask yourself some questions like, Why is this person telling the story? Or can this narrator be trusted? You know, and that is for your personal criticism of this story. All right, so let us go into our second excerpt. And still within the story of Little Red Riding Hood, we are going to be hearing the woodcutter's small take of the happening. So can I get another reader, please? All right, go right ahead, Jeremy. I couldn't believe my eyes. I, Winston the woodcutter, caught a glimpse of that darn wolf in the middle of Redwood Forest. An old fool is all I've been known for, a good-for-nothing wood-chopping fool. But I'll show those villagers. I'll catch that God-forsaken bear and drag him into town. Yeah, that'll show them. I'll be the hero of the day. Then I'll live happily ever after with my beautiful Muriel. Maybe then she'll love me. Oh, Muriel, my sweet Muriel. I think I'll bring you some roses today. Word around town is you haven't been doing so well. Thank you so much, Jeremy. That was an excellent reading. Very funny. I never knew you had that accent in you. So, students, I think I went a little bit ahead of myself, and I actually wanted to show you what an unreliable first-person narrator looks like. So, unlike Little Red Riding Hood, who was caught in the belly of that wolf, we have who we can, say is a reliable narrator. We have the woodcutter, who seems to be missing a few marbles. And we know that he's unreliable because the information that he's giving us is not consistent. So for example, at one point, he says that he saw a wolf, and then further down, he said he saw a bear. And then his thoughts completely segued towards the love of his life. All right. Now let us take a look at the actual excerpt for our next point of view. Can I have another reader, please? Thank you, Anne. Go right ahead. The wolf rocked back in the bed with his stomach bulging enormously, his mouth wide open and Granny's spectacles a tad askew. He winced at the pain of not one, but two whole humans in his stomach. The old woman, went down easily, but that pesky little girl kicked and screamed way too much. He soon found a comfortable position under the duvet and had started drifting off to sleep when suddenly there was a loud rap on the door. With a peep, the wolf sighed. Just his luck. The woodcutter had arrived. Thank you so much, Anne. Love the energy. All right, students. So, like what we did with the first excerpt, I want you to, well, I already changed the slide, but as you can see, the pronouns used in the third person narrator pronouns are he, she, it, they, his, and her, along with others that are perhaps not present in this excerpt. So this is how we can readily identify whether or not the narrator is coming to us from a third person point of view. Another important thing to note is that this third person narrator is an outside narrator who describes what the actors do and what happens to them. So it is not a character within the story, but rather a, as I would have said, outside narrator or someone looking within the story. Now, In order to better understand what the third person narrator does or looks like, we can look at the two types of third person narrator. And this is the omniscient narrator, who has full knowledge of the characters and their thoughts and actions. They have no biases or preferences. And as you can see, I would have highlighted an example of an indication of such a narrator. So in yellow, I have the old woman went down easily, but that pesky little girl kicked and screamed way too much. Now, this tells us that the third person narrator has insight into the wolf's thoughts. He thinks that Little Red Riding Hood is a pesky little girl. And so the third person narrator, because he's omniscient, is able to give us that information. And he also indicates this when he says, just his luck. Now, as Mary would have rightly said in the chat, thank you so much, Mary. If it is that a third person narrator can be omniscient, then it also means that he might not be able to have so much information. And this is called the third person limited. Now, this narrator focuses on one or two especially important characters. So he doesn't know everything about everybody. And this narrator sticks to the facts about the character. So he doesn't say just his luck, and he doesn't disclose how the wolf feels about Little Red Riding Hood. All right, very, very good so far. Now, you are probably wondering, Miss showed us first person and third person. What about second person? And I'll definitely not leave this out, but I want to remind you students that this is not a very popular means of narrating. And I would not recommend that you dwell too much on this form of narration, but I'm still going to show it to you because I want you to have an understanding of it. Can I have a read off for this excerpt, please? Thank you, Michael. You're lying peacefully in bed, waiting for the debilitating pain in your right hip to dissipate after an hour of drinking the fermented herbal painkiller. You cannot help but writhe in pain as you wonder how any human could endure so much in one day. But alas, your heart is comforted as you remember that one day very soon this pain will be no more. With a heavy sigh, you try to take your mind off your ailment and slowly begin to fall asleep. Without warning, your door is flung open and the notorious wolf of the redwood forest charges in. You don't even bother to move or make a sound as you disappear into a foul blackness. Thank you so much, Michael. Excellent reading. So students, the second person narrator, as you would have already picked up, uses you to address the reader. And the reason why it does this is because at this point, the audience is the one that assumes the position of the main character or the protagonist navigating the events in the story. So imagine you're there, you're reading the story, and it feels as if you are actually the one in the story in real time. Now, this can be a jarring sort of narrating, depending on what you prefer, but it is also a very interesting way to narrate a story because, as I would have said, it helps to give a lifelike feel of what is happening. All right, so now that we've gone through the 3 points of view and their variations, I would like you to go into your breakout rooms at this point, and you are going to be rewriting the following excerpt in the point of view assigned. The excerpt reads, "You were on your way to class when you slipped from the curb and soaked your new shoes in a mud puddle. Just your luck. Now what? You're wondering if you should go home and change your shoes or end up being late for class or show up on campus with squeaky feet." So group 1, you have the task of rewriting this excerpt in first person, group 2, third person limited, and group 3, third person omniscient. All right, so you have 5 minutes to take on this task, and I will see you at the end of that time. Good luck. All right, your time has elapsed and we are going to jump straight into the responses. So group 1 says, "I was on my way to class when I slipped from the curb and soaked my new shoes in a mud puddle. Just my luck. Now what? I wonder if I should go home and change my shoes or show up on campus with squeaky feet." Well done, group 1. I definitely see where you have used the first person pronouns and you have been consistent, which is also very important. They didn't switch to third person, they didn't switch to second person, they stayed right on track. Now, group 2, you received third person limited. And students, what do you notice about this excerpt? Yes, Jeremy. The original version had said just your luck. And as we can see, that has been removed. So as third person limited, you are not privy to how the character truly feels in this excerpt. And we definitely see the pronouns coming out as well. And for group 3, as the third person omniscient, similar to group 2, they rephrased the excerpt using the correct pronouns and they replaced just his luck so that we know how the character is feeling. Well done, groups. I am so proud of the work that you've put in today. So let's do a quick little review of what we've learned so far. So we've learned that point of view tells us the type of narrator used to tell the story. We've also learned that the 3 points of view include first person narrator, who can be reliable or unreliable. We have the second person narrator. We have the third person narrator, who is classified as omniscient or limited. And we've also learned that point of view tells us about the type of story that we will read and helps us to understand the characters and what they are experiencing. Any questions so far? Yes, Tom. All right, so Tom says that he's really looking forward to exploring writing from the different points of view, and he'll definitely be sticking to first person and third person because second person is a little bit weird. I agree with you, Tom. All right, students, so what would our lesson today be if we didn't leave with an assignment? So for your assignment, in no more than 100 words, I want you to create a short story that begins with the words in number 1 or end a short story with the words in number 2. Please ensure to consistently use the point of view indicated with your choice of variation. So for example, if you choose number 1, moving day came and everyone except me and big sister was packed and ready to go, you can choose if you want this first person narrator to be unreliable or reliable. And the same thing for number 2. If you're ending your story, if you're going to use option 2, you can choose if you want your third person narrator to be limited or omniscient. And always remember to make your story as lively and interesting as possible. All right, students, so we have come to the end of our class. And as always, I've added some extra information that you can visit to help you with this assignment. I personally have found these information very helpful, and I hope you will too. So until we meet again, enjoy writing, and it was a pleasure being with you guys today. Bye.